Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flawless, a music podcast. My name is Liam, and I am here with my two co-hosts, George.
Hello, Poppets.
And Grant.
Hello, music fans.
Every episode of Flawless, a host or a guest nominates an album and that they think is flawless, and we talk about how they discovered it, why they love it, and what they think makes it flawless. We have a Facebook group. It's called Flawless Friends and Family. There's a link in our show notes. You can go there, tell us all about your favorite episodes of the podcast and your favorite albums. And we also let you know in advance what albums we're going to be covering. So if you've got any thoughts on those, you can let us know at the group. And yeah, link in the show notes. And we also have a Patreon. So from $1 a month, you can back us. There is bonus episodes coming, we hope. Once again, link in the show notes, patreon.com/flawlessamp. And Tuesday nights are our Clubhouse Music live chat, where we talk about episodes of the podcast and all things music and all the flawless albums that people like to talk about. So Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Australian Standard Time. Search on Clubhouse for Australian music industry, or we normally post links in the Facebook group and on our Twitter and everything as well. So check us out there.
We're just all over it, aren't we?
We are trying to be all over it to get to as many people as we can to keep the conversation going. So today is a very special episode.
It is, isn't it?
Oh, I'm excited.
It is very exciting.
Wow.
Because for the first time, we have an international guest who is not actually in the room with us. So we've had guests from overseas before, but this is the first time that they've actually been overseas while we're recording. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Ian Johnson. I am from the United States. Specifically, I am from Kansas City, Missouri, so smack dab right there in the middle, surrounded by a whole lot of nothing. And I am an audio engineer. I am a lifelong musician. I played music with a folk punk band called Slow Motion Commotion, and I'm currently working on a solo project called The Last Innkeeper. I'm also a podcaster myself. I am one third of the show Shitty Mashups. We are a music podcast for people who hate music. We like to say. Each week, my friend Shane, who's going to come up a lot in this episode, gives me and our other friend Ryan a challenge to mash two songs together. Last week, as when we're recording this, our last challenge was to take a song that was made specifically for a movie. So I did I had 9 to 5 and Power of Love and Eye of the Tiger, a whole bunch of them just smashed together.
Oh, yes.
But we're doing all of this from the music research facility in the center of the earth, and each week the winner gets bragging rights, and then the loser is ejected into the cold, inky blackness of space. It is a very fun, silly show.
High stakes.
Yeah, it's very high stakes.
That's how we play here.
Oh, cool.
When one of us gets a flawless, we definitely brag to the others.
Twist the dagger.
Yeah.
Don't we? Yep, that's the game that we play.
I wouldn't know. Because I haven't had one, so I don't actually know what you guys are talking about.
Cool. So, did you want to let us know what album you are nominating today?
Yes, I am nominating the third and final album from the Toms River, New Jersey-based band River City Extension, entitled Deliverance.
Fantastic. Nice work.
Thank you.
So, how did you discover River City Extension?
So I was shown River City Extension by my previously mentioned friend Shane. He was kind of the source of a lot of what would end up being my favorite music. He was very active on a lot of different music forums online, and was just somebody that voraciously consumed new music, and just would show me anything that he thought I would like. And it was probably around I want to say 2011 or 2012, and he was like, hey, I got something to show you. You need to listen to this. And he showed me the song Our New Intelligence off of their first album, The Unmistakable Man, which is an incredible song, and I was just instantly obsessed with it, and listened to it constantly, and then started listening to the whole album and fell in love with every single song on it, and just, I don't know, it just activated something in me, and after that I followed them super closely, just constantly looking for new music. And I should preface here at the start of this episode that I have like an intensely personal connection to this band. I actually kind of developed a kind of a friendship with their lead singer, Joe McGinniss. I sent them a message after a while because their music just meant so much to me, and I sent them an email outlining all of that, and they responded, and then we got to talking on Twitter, and then went and saw them multiple times live while they were touring, and put them up at my cousin's place a couple of times when they were in Columbia, Missouri. And
So this episode, like, our opinion is going to be interlinked for you on a personal level,
Yes.
and not just based on the fact that you love the music. So there's no pressure.
it is
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
I think this is the first time someone's nominated an album by someone that they actually knew. Like, it's usually
Personally,
there's that bit of a disconnect.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I never met Nick Drake, did I?
No.
So,
So you said that you fell in love with that like right from the start. What made you pick this album over one of the
There
other
we
couple
go.
that you could have nominated?
So they had 3 albums total. Their first was The Unmistakable Man. The second is Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Your Anger, and the one we are talking about today is their third, Deliverance. I would say that Deliverance and The Unmistakable Man are kind of tied in my head. I still really love Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Your Anger, but it is kind of the middle child a little bit for me. And I picked Deliverance because I think I wanted to talk a little. I think for me, it's sort of the context of it being their final album. It's kind of the last step in their evolution a little bit. If you look at it as like a trilogy of albums, which I don't think it was intended that way. They called it quits after this album kind of went through its release cycle. And I don't think that it was intended necessarily to be their last album, but it does sort of make it the last chapter. And at least, for this band, they've all gone on to do other things, but it's just kind of a culmination of their story a little bit. And I think that's what makes it really good. And it makes it very interesting to talk about. And also it's one of the more easily available albums. I wanted people to be able to go out and listen to them. Their first 2 albums are still available. They're out there like on YouTube and you can purchase them, but they're not streaming anywhere for some reason. It had something to do with the label that they were on. So only Deliverance is available on Spotify, but this is a band that I think is terribly underappreciated, and I want your guys' listeners to be able to go out and listen to them. So I thought, we would talk about the one that is a little bit more available.
Yeah, for sure.
awesome.
George.
Hello.
Have you ever heard of River City Extension before it was nominated?
I had not, and it's one of those moments where I get really, really pissy at myself, where I go, I've not heard this before, but this is definitely in my wheelhouse, because not only have they supported bands that I was obsessed with, like Brand New, the Get Up Kids, Max Famous from Say Anything, Kevin Devine and Alkaline Trio. They also released a split 7-inch with Kevin Devine in 2011, who's somebody that I've seen lots and lots of times. So I feel like I've been on the outskirts of this band, and yet I never heard them, and so I'm very annoyed that I'd never heard the band before and I'd never heard the album before, but I am a better person for it.
Cool. Grant.
How succinct. Hey, George. Well, haven't we become more refined? Come on, Liam, ask the question. There you go.
Have you ever heard of River City Extension before? The question followed on. I assumed you would just go with it.
Yeah, look, and we go. No, of course not. Well, forgive me. No, I hadn't. But I suppose I'm a lot kinder / gentler on myself than George, because I fall back to the whole I'm from Africa, and late 2009, 10, 11-ish. Wasn't necessarily at the peak of my powers, so to speak.
Well, this is 2015.
Yeah, but even that's the earlier stuff. Sorry, when I suppose when you fell in love with it there, Ian, or discovering them.
So you're saying from being from Africa, you weren't super plugged into the New Jersey Americana scene?
Well, save for, let's be honest. I don't know if you heard our earlier podcast. There was a guy called Bon Jovi in the self-titled album New Jersey.
Yeah, and Titus Andronicus, which I know you guys have talked about. They're also from New Jersey.
We did. Mm-hmm. We did. No, we're good actually.
Yep.
It's a good album too.
They're in a similar zone.
But no, I'm certainly, I would consider myself a very in the bronze medal position in terms of overall music knowledge between the three of us co-hosts here, Ian. So no, I hadn't heard of them, and yeah, I'm certainly disappointed, and was a lot of strings, and that pulls close to my heart.
It does, yeah.
I'm like, hey,
As a violinist yourself.
former,
Nah,
I'm
you're
like,
always
hey, I
one.
need to play again, man.
Nice. But yeah.
So thank you. But yeah,
Liam.
No, I had not heard of them. Yeah, I'm in a similar vein in that I wish I had. But this band also, having now listened to this, is one of those things where you hear people say, oh, no one's making this kind of music. No one's making dance music. No one, you always hear, no one listens to this kind of music anymore. This is a perfect band of example for me of lots of bands are making lots of stuff. All you have to do is put a little bit of effort in to go out and find it and get people to recommend it to you. Sure, it might not be super in the charts or all over the radio as much anymore, but as it used to be, but it's still out there, and all you need is to go and do a little bit of work. So it always frustrates me when people say, oh, no one's making this kind of music or that. It's like every style and genre, everything you want to make is still being made. Everything you want to listen to is still being made. You've just got to maybe put a little bit extra work in than you used to.
So Ian, you mentioned Titus Andronicus. Have you listened to a couple of our podcasts before then?
I have, yeah. I listened. That was the first episode I listened to, because that's another one of my favorite albums. The Monitor. It's my ultimate summer album.
Right, ultimate.
I love driving around with the windows down, just screaming those anthems. It's a great album. And I listened to your the Jeff Buckley Grace episode, because that's another great album.
I was robbed.
Yeah, I was with you, George.
Heathens.
But I've been jumping around through some of the albums that I'm more familiar with.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I have not given the time that they deserve, but I want to check out. So.
No, I appreciate you.
So you mentioned that this album probably not, all the bands probably not as well known. I when I was doing my research, I did find it hard to find information about the album, specifically who actually played on it, because there's no Wikipedia entry for it, and the Discogs entry doesn't have that information. But Ian, you might know if you got that connection to the band.
Yeah.
Who were the actual musicians that played on the album?
So I found reference that there was around 8 people in the band at any one time,
I've seen that, yeah.
and there was 15 past members that I saw. But that's usually we're able to say this person played the violin or this person played the drums and all that kind of stuff. And it was nearly impossible. So at this point, when they were releasing Deliverance, do you know who was in the band?
Yeah. So as you said, they had a big lineup at times. When they released their second album, they had 8 members, as you said. But after that album and the tour, a lot of people dropped out, just due to different reasons. And it ultimately, this album was mostly written just by 3 of kind of the core members. Joe Michelini, who's always been the kind of the core of the project, and they've actually said that this was one of their more collaborative albums. Joe primarily wrote most of the songs for their first 2 albums. They would all work together on it, but he was always kind of the driving force. And this one, I was reading some interviews from them just to get myself familiar with everything about it. And this was more of a collaborative effort. But so this album was basically, it was Joe, John Muccino, I hope I'm saying his name right, who's just an incredible composer and guitar player, and then Patrick O'Brien, who is their keys player. And then they did it with the help of Pat Noon, was their producer. He'd produced all of their albums, but they recorded it up at a ski lodge in the Poconos that like a family friend or something like that owned, and it was in the middle of April, so it was kind of deserted, and just sort of went up there. And then they brought in a few people, a few friends to play different parts, but at the time of the writing of the album, specifically, it was mostly the three of them. I have the full list here of who else happened. I know they had Rachel Gowell played the cello. They brought in a full string quartet, actually, which all the string stuff was composed by John Muccino. He composed all of that, and they brought in the quartet. And then I'm not sure from the recording to their touring how that lineup changed. I know the last couple times that I saw them live, it was about 5 or 6 people total. So, but I don't know necessarily at that point who was considered a core member a core member versus just like a player,
touring guest.
But yeah.
So when this album opened, like I had it on in the background. Just like I usually just have stuff on in the background, like the first time I listened to it.
Yeah.
And it felt like, and this is my interpretation on the first song, Something's Gotta Give, was where with those strings, piano, the woos, and Joe's singing just made it feel like Polyphonic Spree had an affair with Bruce Springsteen, and this is what came out. And I thought it was one of the funnest kind of intros to an album. It was really, really fun. So that was my interpretation.
Yeah.
So apologies if that upsets people from Jersey.
They're definitely like they defy genre, not in that they don't sound like anybody else, but more like that they've taken parts of lots of different genres.
Sure.
I have something written down in my notes that they kind of defy classification. Like they started as kind of their first album came out in 2010, and it was very much kind of a very folk influenced, and I think it kind of was part of the sort of folk pop fad of that time, like when Mumford and Sons and Lumineers and all that were getting big, and so they got a lot of people from that. But then as they progressed, like their second album, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Your Anger, is a lot more like just kind of singer-songwriter focused, and then this album is just, it's so weird because it's like it still has that kind of Americana folk bass, but it's also very jazzy, and it's also got like some like surf rock elements in it, and it's just it absolutely does not conform to any single genre, and that's something I love about it.
Nice. Do you think that it was just thinking out loud, that it was to the album's detriment, that it's not easy to define it?
Oh, so it means that it didn't get into Billboard and stuff like that, you mean?
Yeah.
I do actually. I that's something that I wrote in my notes, that the second album got a lot of critical praise, but it didn't really connect, I think, with a wider audience. I think they kind of lost some people because it didn't have that sort of same folk pop sound as the first album, and people were so into that. And so then when the second album was a little bit more muted, I think there was a little bit of a drop off, and that was something that I think factored kind of heavily into what they were doing on this record a little bit, because I think they were sort of grappling with that, and I think it's not to the detriment of the record in terms of the quality of the product that is produced, because I think it's perfect. I think that it does make it harder, because when you do want to kind of break into that sort of mainstream thing and get radio play and whatever, it's
Yes.
it's easier when you can fit into a nice little neat box. And
Correct.
This
Yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't fit into any single neat box, but it's also
Doesn't
not,
get pigeonholed.
yeah. But it's not like it's so like weird or out there, or that it could be considered like experimental or like niche. And so it just kind of falls into this weird crack in between there where it's like it's too weird for some audiences, but it's not weird enough to like build like a really devoted, like, you know, niche audience.
Yeah, it's not avant-garde. It's not avant-garde or anything like that.
Yeah. And you know, it's I don't know, art rock maybe is the best you could call it. I don't know. It's all I know is that it's fucking good, and I wish that more music sounded like this.
Yeah.
There were some elements that reminded me that it felt like a softer cursive, and cursive never really fit into one particular like place, but was still recognized because they had more vitriol with their music. They kind of got picked up a lot more, but there were elements of this for sure where it felt like Joe singing, and like the melody behind it and the way the instruments were playing off each other, especially having a cello, made me feel like there was like it was like a really friendly version of a cursive record, as opposed to the vitriolic version that you would normally get from cursive.
So talking about something's got to give, it's just got that everyone will have heard when I put in those like cool, crisp guitars right at the start. Like the production effects and everything, the mixing is really well done on this whole album, but just all the way through. And then like, yeah, so it's got the crisp guitars, and then it brings in that orchestral flourish, and then it cuts it back, and then it brings it back in again. It's sort of, it really ebbs and flows. I think it's a really perfect introduction to what the band sound is for this album.
Yes.
Like, if from the way you're describing Ian, they didn't sound like this before necessarily. It was quite different from their first and second ones. But if you listen to this first one, you're like, this is who we're going to be. So
I think
also there's twiddly guitar solos, but it's not wanky.
no, not big power rock guitars.
It's
just
not cock rock.
arpeggiated
fret
guitar
wanking.
solo gets me so hyped every time. It's just like it's up and down, and it's like it's unlike any guitar solo I feel like I've ever heard, and I love it so much. And I love the way that this song also just cuts off at the end as well.
Yeah.
It just
It's
stops.
like the full band, and then just stops,
And
then you're like, oh, new song.
One of the things I love about this album is the push and pull of it. It knows when to go it knows when to go hard and like they use dissonance in such an interesting way, which I think is where like that very kind of like heavy sort of jazz influence comes in. And you know, there are times where it's just like it's very like sonically dense. There's a lot going on, and there's just like this noise, but then they know to like pull back from that, right? Like they don't keep beating you up with it, and then they'll sort of pull back and let you kind of rest in something simpler for a minute. Like even just going from Something's Gotta Give into Man of Conviction, you know, it's this big discordant, you know, guitars kind of breaking down, and then this hard stop, and then just this, you know, kind of smooth intro into
Soft,
Man of Conviction. It's so good.
Sonically dense, bud.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I think it's a good description.
And it's, that's really, when the guitars come in, it's really jazzy. And there's the ooh, ooh kind of harmonies over that surfy guitar with another solo. But again, it's not confronting, it fits. And it has, so lyrically, like I generally write lyrics for a few tracks when I'm listening to an album, but here I was writing lyrics down for like every single track because the lyrical content was so beautiful. And in Man of Conviction, I really liked it when and then there's harmonies of oohs and oohs, and that's just like,
there's lots of oohs all the way through the album.
Yes, which and you know I love an ooh,
And
an
an
ooh and an
ah.
ah.
No,
Yeah.
No.
Exactly. And at one point there's whistling as well.
And,
So I was just
and in Man of Conviction, there's also some hand claps, like not really bold ones, like where it's like hand clap solo, but it's you can hear just mixed in a little bit with the drums towards the end, like little hand claps.
Yeah.
sucker for a hand clap.
So I want to give you guys a direct quote from Joe, just kind of about this album as a whole. Something that they said about it is the first half is about conquering self-doubt through self-worth and how powerful that can be. The second half talks about whether it's worth it to conquer doubt at all and if we can really make a difference in the world. And I think that's like pretty much the thesis of this whole album. And I was also reading a lot of Joe grew up in a very religious household, and a lot of songs on the first two records dealt with faith and God and spirituality. And he said that specifically he wanted to do a record that didn't deal with that, and also didn't. He said the three things that he didn't want to write about were God, women, or drinking. And one of the things I love
My
about
three favorite things.
Yeah, so not super rock and roll then. Yeah.
yeah. But so one of the things I love in Man of Conviction is the second verse, because the question, right, is this self-doubt and finding yourself in the world, and like what is kind of the purpose of being here. And I think that one of the answers that is often given to that sort of question in music is, love, which, don't get me wrong, I love love, but there's a lot of love songs. And so I love the second verse in Man of Conviction where he says, there's a man of conviction who takes every position. He's the latest addition that we can find. And he says, love is the answer. And they clap till their hands hurt, but love isn't on their minds. So I love that the album is posing this question of like, what are we doing here? And in the second song, he's pretty much saying it's like, okay, it's not love. Let's just take that off the table. Like, love is great, but that's not what we're talking about right now. And I don't know. I adore that.
Yeah. You and I, Ian, are lyric buddies, which is what we call it when we write down the exact same lyrics, because I had those exact phrases written down on mine as well.
Heck yes.
And that's like that same thing for me as being raised Catholic and then moving away from the church is like, it's not too often, it's not about love and it's not about the things that it should be about. It's about something else.
Yeah.
Catholicism or the church, you mean say?
A lot of people's expression and the way they exercise their religion is not about that. Not what it should be about.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So we probably won't have time to go through all the songs. Grant, did you have anything with your double tick?
But look, I'll be so bold to say I might have been tempted to do a triple tick,
Ooh.
which is unheard of.
What
nearly got
a triple tick?
Oh yeah, look. Well, Ohio. I mean, you go into the next one.
Yeah.
And
It's a perfectly placed third track, like
Yes.
intense song, and then third song you just take the foot off just a little bit. Tell us about Ohio.
Oh well, I could just, I suppose maybe on the back of a recent reference to Ohio,
Yes.
being brought in there on a swarm of bees by another group. It's just like, well, here's a different take on the same. We've just been listening about this place, and it's like, well, I should be going there because everyone seems to like this place, But I thought that could almost have gone triple.
Because that starts out like it sounds softer right from the start. It's more acoustic, more analog sort of instrument stuff. And then at the halfway point, it kicks in and like the big electric guitars and the big flourish comes in again. It's really cool.
And the percussion at the beginning sounds like they're hitting drain pipes.
Yeah. Just like
that really interesting
DIY
sound.
sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So yeah, that was a really interesting sound. And then like the fact there was just this one little hook of
Hold my face. I love you with the confidence of age.
like it's
Nice.
So good.
Yeah.
Like,
So good.
yeah, so
I
good.
have, we're
Such-
lyric buddies because I have that written down too. I had to mention that.
More lyric buddies.
Good. Oh, it hits you.
Really does. I love you with the confidence of 8. I'm getting married and I'm genuinely considering using that as part of my vows.
Nice.
Because I just thought it was so beautiful. Like usually Liam will find a lyric that he loves so much he wants tattooed on him. And then, but for me, I'm thinking that line is so just absolutely perfect that I'm genuinely going to put it in my vows, and my partner will have no freaking idea what I'm talking about. So that's
but
fun.
he'd appreciate it.
Yeah, he'd appreciate it, I'm sure. Yeah.
And what about Vox
Real quick, I was going to
Sorry.
say the one other
Yeah,
line
you
I
go,
wanted to
Ian.
mention from Ohio is, so it would seem it was worth it just to glimpse upon a dream to owe yourself the future you have seen. I love that. I love that so much. And
Nice.
This album as a whole is so much about them kind of dealing with, a lot of people leaving after Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Your Anger came out. And it's one of the other questions about this album is like, is it worth it to throw yourself so completely into something that requires you to leave a more conventional life behind? And it's like that is one of the running themes of this whole album. And I don't know, this just connected with me so much at this time in my life. And
Why do you think, particularly in this time of your life, bud?
in this time of my life, so the reason I'm an audio engineer is because of this band.
Stop it.
It was
Whoa.
no.
Yeah,
it
we go.
genuinely
Now
is.
we're ripping them. Yeah.
When I first went into college, I was planning on going into filmmaking, and I did a couple of years like at a community college, sort of getting my prereqs out of the way, and then was going to transfer to a local art college, and got like the highest scholarship that they offered for it, but like I was looking at it, was like I was still going to owe like $100,000 in student loans by the end of it, and I had just kind of like I didn't feel like the passion and really the drive that I needed at that moment, and I was like, I don't think
$400,000. Yeah, you need to be passionate. Bud.
yeah,
that's it.
exactly.
Like
you need to be pretty sure.
you've got to have an end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I just needed to kind of take a break and figure this stuff out. And I just started working for a while, and it was the technically third time that I saw them live. So me and
Technically?
yeah, so me and my friend, the first time I saw him was a week after my 21st birthday. Right, it was either right before or after they'd put out their second album, and then it was maybe a year or two later, and they were on tour, and me and my buddy Shane, they were playing in St. Louis and Columbia, Missouri, which are Columbia is basically right between Kansas City and St. Louis. So me and Shane drove to St. Louis, saw him there, and then drove to Columbia the next night and saw him there. And then they needed a place to crash after their show in Columbia. And actually, I had reached out because I'd seen them on Twitter beforehand. They'd been posting a lot of, in their stops of like, hey, if you're in the city that we're in right now and you have a place we could, crash for the night, let us know. And so I sent them out an email that was just like, because this was after I'd kind of sent that initial email to them and sort of made contact and talked with them on Twitter and everything. So we had a little bit of a relationship at this point. And I was like, hey, if you guys need a place in Columbia, like, let us know. And they were like, oh, actually, we've already got Columbia sorted, but thanks. And I was like, well. And then the morning that we woke up to drive to St. Louis, they were like, hey, actually, we do need a place to stay in Columbia. And so it was so exciting. It was a surreal, it is one of the best nights of my life, honestly, because I was hanging out with my favorite band that I loved at my cousin's place, like playing video games, drinking beers, like chatting, like watching the lead singer of my favorite band, who has written some of the most amazing songs that I think I've ever heard, sitting there playing my guitar. And it was
what a nice cousin, though.
Yeah.
It's not even on your own back. It's on it's your cousin who's put him up.
He's a
really
good guy.
Cool,
right? But anyway, as I was watching that, I realized it was like music was the thing that I had a passion for. It's like, this is what I've been doing. Like, I've been doing music my whole life. A
defining moment.
And I just kind of had this sort of aha moment. And then from there, I was like, oh, well, getting a degree in audio engineering, that allows me to work with music. That seems like, kind of a stable career, as opposed to, maybe throwing myself full force into just being a musician. I was like, this seems like a smart move that will help me make my music, but also be a skill that I can use to fall back on, if I don't become super duper famous, which I have not yet.
Yet,
That's
I like it.
lovely.
Still coming.
But
That's really
There's still
cute.
time. There's still
Oh, there
time
is- yeah,
for you to
yeah.
become
Oh, yeah.
super duper.
yeah, absolutely. So if when I do, I'm sure that if this podcast blows up because everybody's coming back to listen to this episode, you guys can say you knew me when.
That's right, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
getting famous, so if you could get famous for us, that would be
Yeah,
much
just don't forget about the
appreciated.
little people, bud. Don't forget about us.
No, absolutely not. But
George, any songs you wanted to talk about, bring to the fore?
Oh, well,
All of them.
Well, yeah, pretty much all of them. But there was there is a long lyric in White Blackmail.
we have to talk about White Blackmail.
That's surfy warm guitars, driving low drums, piano chords that lift with urgency, and then it had that kind of real Jersey sound. That dirty guitar soloing, and then that clean guitar soloing and stuff, and like mixture was awesome. But like that whole outro of
When the curtain finally falls, it won't bother me at all. I bet my world to let you in. It won't be coming back again. This weight I carry sets me free. In the mirror dimly I do see. For you my heart will always bleed. I love you, honey, take what you want from me.
Nice.
with some
I got the first half of that written down.
yeah. Well, it was just
half lyric buddies.
half lyric buddies. Yeah, it was just I didn't know where to stop, and if you can't see my page, but I was like writing
lot.
and writing and writing
yeah.
because there was just so much. So that's a really impactful track for sure.
There's definitely they've definitely taken some inspiration from Springsteen at various
Yes,
points.
definitely.
I thought this was one of the most Springsteen in the delivery of the vocals. I was like, I could just see him, Springsteen, up on stage singing this song in this sort of tone and everything. It was really cool.
In some tight blue jeans.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first thing I gotta ask, if you guys noticed in White Blackmail, if you didn't catch it, next time you listen to this album, you have to listen for it. So after the guitar solo, it starts before it gets into the whole lyric that George just quoted. It actually, the music does like a reprise of like all of the musical themes in the album so far. I actually have, because I reached out when I didn't catch it till like my third listen through of the album, and I immediately like sent them an email and I was like, wait, did I hear like this in White Blackmail? And they sent me like the sheet music that they actually had, like the instrumentation, and it basically, it goes through, it plays a line from Ohio. There's like a little bit of the kind of surf guitar solo from Something's Gotta Give. It's got a line from Indian Summer and I Wouldn't Worry. Like it plays through like a bunch of the melodies that have come prior, and it's just amazing. White Blackmail is honestly, to me, it is the climax of the album. It's so good, and hold on, I gotta look at my notes here real quick because I got some shit to say about White Blackmail. It's honestly it's my favorite song on the album, and I Love You, Honey, Take What You Want From Me is such a meaningful line to me, because it's this whole album about deliverance, obviously, and it's about self-doubt and self-worth and this journey of is it worth it and what are we doing here. And like, to me, I Love You, Honey, Take What You Want From Me represents that you have made peace with who you are and what you have to give and what you're doing here. It's just like, I love you. You can have what you want. It's not like a giving tree situation or anything like that, but it's just like, no, I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. I love you and I trust you, and you can take what you need from that, and I will be able to provide. It's trusting yourself that I can give it to you. And that's just, it's
being able to be that vulnerable with
Yeah.
another person.
Absolutely.
Is like the end game.
Yeah.
yeah.
And we can't skip past Deliverance Part 2
No.
as a song on an album,
So
because
that's the kind of part, the thing for me that splits it into two parts. Like it's the perfect middle part in them. So it's like you've had the 5 starters, then that with just the opening with the dueling
String.
violin parts and the strings,
Oh,
and then the plucked acoustic and his deeper voice. So in this one is his voice doesn't have to stand alone, but it really puts a spotlight on it because it has to stand up against just the softer instruments. And then at the end, it comes back with a little piano piece at the end.
But you can hear them moving from the guitar, walking with the tweeting, walking over, sitting down, creaking the piano stool, and then the piano comes in for the last 25 seconds.
Yeah.
But you can actually hear the movement in the studio. It wasn't in 2 layers. It was just going and moving from here to here. And when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, you sneaky little shit. That's really nice.
Well, and the bird...
Like, it was a really nice one.
The bird sounds that you kind of hear in that too are genuine. It's literally just, like I said, they recorded it at the ski lodge in the Poconos, and so it was just it wasn't a recording studio. It was kind of this just improvised open space, and that's what they actually, that was the sounds that were actually happening. And yeah, I love that it's bookended with the instrumental parts, the string quartet, and then the piano bit at the end. And this, like I think I might have said this earlier, but like this is where he presents the thesis of the album, right? Like I could read the entire lyrics to it. Like I can't just pick one lyric from this to read, but I think what I love about this band and this album specifically is that I think that we all experience these fleeting moments of profoundness. Sometimes there's these moments where our perspective can widen, and you step back and you sort of can see everything on a more cosmic scale, and it feels like you can see your purpose within that, right? Like you should be able to find those answers that you're looking for if you could look at it long enough, but you can't. Your eyes always snap back, and then suddenly you're seeing the trees and not the forest. And this Joe's lyrics to me are able to capture sort of the frustration but also like the gratitude for moments like that in a way that like blows my mind. He does it in a way that nobody else can, and they do it in a way that nobody else can, and I don't know if it's something that just me and them are on a similar wavelength, and I just happen to find that at the right time in the right place. But I don't know. I have to think that it's a more universal experience than that. And that's like why I always want to share this album with people, because I think it's so much about those frustrating moments where it's like you can see it for a second, but not long enough to glean anything or make a profound change in your life based off of solely just one of those moments, which is where I will highlight one lyric in this song without reading the whole thing, which is, "Strange how nothing changed and it brought you to your knees."
I had that too.
Yeah.
Lyric buddies.
Yeah.
Lyric buddies. There's so many good ones. I mean they're all incredible.
Yeah, I wrote too much down. I wrote too many notes.
This is a 4-hour recording session, right? I'm
Not
gonna keep going
quite.
because I will talk about this album for that long. I have so many notes that I haven't even touched on.
Liam, did you have songs that you wanted to touch on?
So my favorite one that we haven't touched on yet is Indian Summer.
Yes.
Which I think, because I can't remember if I mentioned it already, but the other band that these guys bring to mind is a bit of an Arcade Fire element to it. Like taking, I guess, what would almost be regular rock parts and then mixing them in a different way. And I think this one is very Arcade Fire. So it's like it's quite barreling and propulsive. And then there's this awesome bit right before the bridge, and then it cuts away to just like the piano, but it's not being bashed, but it's like it's being... You can feel it being hit a lot harder than it was. Like, it's not a smooth rolling melody. It's like dum, 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 dum. And then in the back half, it somehow even like picks up the intensity, and it's like this wailing cacophony, and he's yelling and screaming. Sorry, they're yelling and screaming. And it's just, yeah, really cool song.
And there's those moments where they're singing, "All I Want to Do Is Your," and then
Yeah,
it drops
and it just stops.
That's like
that
the
was
push
just-
and pull that I was talking about earlier. I think,
Mm.
especially
Yeah,
in that
definitely.
song, it really comes through.
And on that one, I had like loads of lyrics, but there was just in particular.
If you wanna stay, you should probably stay, but you never take the risk.
And I thought that was just like
Yeah.
that's that push and pull in a relationship with somebody too. Like I really enjoyed.
Yeah,
Cool.
and see, I don't see that song as necessarily about relationships like in a romantic sense. Like I said, I think this is, so much of it is about kind of struggling with the people that were sort of coming and going from this project, and it's sort of it's not a condemnation of the people that left in any way, but it's just like my heart is fully in this thing, and like either yours is or it isn't, but that's up to you. And if it isn't, then maybe you got to move on, and that's okay.
Because
Yeah.
they even sing, but is there love in your heart?
Is there
truth in your
art?
art? And that was a real like cursive lyric for me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
for sure. So yeah, it's a really beautiful song.
I'm going to try and make this quick because I know we're already running a little long, but a quick story about that line in particular, because that's another thing that I feel like I had in that same time when I went to St. Louis and Columbia, after the St. Louis show, me and Shane were chatting with Joe, and this was when me and Shane were my previously mentioned folk punk band Slow Motion Commotion. We were just kind of talking to them about songwriting and their philosophy on it, and they said, if you're writing anything, if it's not genuine and true to yourself, then it's not worth writing. And that is something that has shaped everything that I have ever created since then. And seeing that here years later when they put out this album, and knowing that they still believe that, and seeing how much of themselves they really poured into this record, gives me a lot of assurance that that is a good tenet to keep following.
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Okay, so as you mentioned, we're running a bit short on time. So was there any other big ticket stuff that you absolutely wanted to mention, Ian?
So the one thing I'll say, with the two songs we haven't really touched on, there's, I guess we didn't really talk about I Wouldn't Worry. It's a good song. Good stuff. All of them are good. But the two last kind of points, I guess, are, so Vox Populi, the penultimate song on the album, is kind of...
I wrote big penultimate. I literally wrote the words "big penultimate."
Yeah.
Like when I write my notes.
It's very interesting, I think, especially after White Blackmail, which feels like the climax of the album, and then Vox Populi is this very weird, kind of an outlier, I think, on the album. It's got a much kind of darker tone, and I think a little bit more of an exasperated feeling to it in the lyrics. And I think what it is to me, it's kind of the counterpoint to the thesis. This is an album about self-reflection and self-doubt and self-worth and making peace with your place in the world. And then this song is kind of about the people on the outside of that journey that don't really appreciate it, and just want you to, just do something, make something for me, or, quit whining about it, sort of thing. And I think that makes it interesting. I think that it is a, like I said, it is one of the weirder songs on the album, but I also think that it is critical to the kind of overall theme. That's all I really want to say about Vox Populi, but we got to talk about I'm Not There, the closing song.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that softer piano-led song.
Yes.
A little bit of Elton John at the very end.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's got this beautiful swing to it with the slide guitar when the drums come in. It's so good. And there's just so many good lyrics in it. I know, like,
Any longer, we'll come out stronger. Holding on if by thread.
I cannot tell you how many times I have felt that in my life. And
I really love what's the use in understanding? If there's a truth, who's going to care? So I quit my thinking, won't try to blend in like I was never really there.
Yeah.
So
I
this
literally
is why
just got
I thought,
goosebumps just from hearing you, like, just hearing it read aloud. It still gives me goosebumps. That the end of that will
well, I
make me
think it's a
cry.
really good journey because we start the album with Something's Gotta Give, which is this big positive number, and it's like really like out there. And when you talk about it being in two halves, finishing on I'm Not There, and that introspection is really beautiful because it's there felt like there was a realism to the journey. So it's like sometimes there are those massive highs and you can be on that part of the journey. But at the end, if you are thinking about all of the different conversations that they've had in all of the tracks, ending it on that one was like a really daring to not end it on Vox Populi. And it was like really... it was a smart move.
Yeah, so the first song sounds big and confident. Like, here we are. Here's our message. We've got things to say, and these things are important. Here you go. And then the last one is like they're just as lost as everybody else. Like, they don't have all the answers. They've gone. It's almost like if they wrote this one last, it's almost like they got through the whole album, like hoping that by the end they'd have the answer. And they've gotten to the end and they're like, and I still don't have the... Yeah, it might actually be worse than when I started. I don't have the answers. And I don't know how to get where I'm going.
Like,
There's a lot of reads on the end of the album, and I view it hopefully. Like, to me it makes it is a positive note. You know, even the thought of the, like, I was never really there, because earlier in Deliverance Part 2, when he says, you know, what deliverance I have found, that the world is spinning round without me. And so it's like he's talking about, like, I was never really there, but there's also like this sense of peace that's been made with that fact. And I love what you guys were saying, because that is something I love about this album, is that it feels like it is asking such big questions, and it at no point does it pretend to have the answers, because none of those questions are really about the answers. It is about just asking yourself those questions and being okay with not having an answer, and figuring out how to live what you believe to be a good life without having necessarily the instructions or you know, a clear definitive answer as to what that's going to mean in the end.
Cool. So I think we're up to final pitch time. Ian, would you like to give us... You've given us so many awesome words so far. Would you like to give us a big summary of all your feelings about this album?
Yeah. Honestly, I probably should have saved some of those words for this, because I'm probably just going to retread a lot of ground. But I think that here's my pitch. First off, musically, it is unlike anything else. It is influenced by a lot of things, and it's not unfamiliar, but it feels fresh and unique and distinctive and enjoyable. You know, musically, this album goes a lot of places and plays with a lot of different things, but it never feels disjointed. It never feels like, whoa, that's a weird one. You know, like it never feels uncohesive. It all comes together very well. And it's, like I said, it's just sonically, it's just beautiful. It's beautifully engineered and mastered, and it's great. Lyrically and thematically, it is, like I was just saying, you know, it's asking these big questions without pretending to have the answers. It is so deeply personal, I think, to Joe and to the other members, and that is, to me, that's something that's what I want out of my art. Like, that's what I want whenever I'm listening to music. I want to know that a person has put part of themselves into it to share with me. That is what music is about. It is about the connection. And when you read these lyrics and you come to understand this journey that I think that everybody should go on at some point. You know, we all struggle with the things that Joe has struggled with, and knowing that there are other people out there that are processing that and trying to make peace and understanding and are okay with not necessarily having that understanding, but able to make peace within their life with that. That's a beautiful thing. And I don't know. Like I said, to me, this is such a personal experience that I know that I have felt, and knowing that somebody else has felt that same way is what helps me sleep at night. And, you know, I don't know if it's something that you guys have felt and if it connects with you in the same way, but even still, I think it's flawless. It's a masterpiece.
Cool. Awesome. George,
Hello.
over to you for a final thoughts and a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Oh, final thoughts. I'm doing that thing again where I go, where has this been for the last 6 years of my life? And now where can I find the rest of it? So, as I mentioned, they've supported bands that I have loved for many, many years, like people like the Get Up Kids and stuff, like that I've loved for like 20 years or something. So I'm annoyed that I've not heard it before, but it's 10 tracks in 41 minutes. It moves me through different journeys, different emotions. Lyrically, I think it's impeccable. Musically, I was completely blown away. And it was not something I told you I put it on in the background. And then it was something that I had to stop and listen to, that I couldn't put it on in the background. So from my perspective, there's nothing I would move. There's nothing I would take away. There's nothing I would add. I think they set out to deliver something, and they've absolutely delivered it. So from my perspective, this album is definitely, hands down, a flawless album that is going on my repeat listen playlist for sure.
Nice.
So thank you, Ian.
You can't see it, but I just did a fist bump over on my side.
Grant, final thoughts and a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Jeez. So look, lots to like for mine. On the opening track, I'm like, hey, listen to this guitar, and then the strings come in. I'm like, what's going on here? Who are these guys? And who's River City Extension? And then Man of Conviction comes on, and I'm like, yes, I've got all this. And things I suppose I actually didn't like in the beginning. Something's got to give. The end, I thought, oh, geez, why'd you just do that to me? You're causing trouble. And the strings, to be honest, in the opening of Deliverance, I was like, and I'm a stringed man, you know. And then we didn't really speak. Well, at the end, you spoke, I suppose, Ian, about Vox Populi. And I'm like, what sort of an intro is this? And then it starts up again, and I'm like, and it goes from your waxing and waning, and you know, power on, power off, instruments in, instruments out, and so my first listen, I was like, hey, listen, I actually got hold of my friend Doug Funnikirk, if he listens to this, and said, Doug, you've got to listen to these guys because this is really good. It's not flawless, but it's really good. And I've carried on listening to it, and now I think it's flawless. So I'm like, and it is. When I started looking for faults in particular songs, I'm like, no, in totality, those parts that I actually didn't like actually grew on me more than, you know, the other parts. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel, you know, richer for you, Ian, bringing it to flawless, and I think it's flawless. Boom, thank you. Done.
Awesome. There you go. And then over to Mr. Liam.
To Liam. Oh, yeah, you go, but Granddaddy.
Right. Yeah, so it's never heard of them before. The pastiche of genres is really interesting. So it's like part country, part Springsteen, like populist rock, part like these Arcade Fire barrelers, part like soul and bluesy and surf rock and all that sort of stuff. I think the lyrics are great. The songwriting is really well done. Everything sort of like they're really good at all the different parts. So there's lots of really good guitar parts, lots of really good orchestral parts. The thing where it fell down for me was sometimes it felt like they had all these people who played all these instruments, and they had to force every instrument to appear in a song.
Okay.
So there were some parts where it was like it would get to a point of the song, and I'd feel like, oh, okay, so the song's probably over now, or it's just going to continue on. And then they'd bring in a whole new part, like it might be the orchestral thing, or it might be a surf rock part. So it felt like, and then so on Deliverance Part 2, where it's got the orchestral part at the front and then the acoustic guitar, and then you said it's got the piano and you hear them going over the piano. I didn't like the piano bit on the end. I was just like, the song's over.
Didn't need it.
And I think if I was producing the album for them, I'd be like, you don't need that, guys. You can just stop the song here. So it's not that it's a bad part, but I just think too many of the songs felt like they had too many parts, and there was just so much going on all the time that I felt like they groaned. I think my phrase obviously like they groaned under the weight of it a little bit. Like sometimes they just wanted to show us, here's all these things we can do with all these different instruments so often. So the opening one, I was like, oh, that's a big epic part with like a big opening song with 8 different parts, and it's going to be, that's going to be the big thing, and maybe they'll do another one like that at the end. And then in the end, they were all like that. They were all big things that had lots of stuff to do, and I felt that I struggled with that. I think I would have liked it. Like it's an amazing album. It absolutely is fantastic, but I just feel like just needed a little bit of a trim on it, and so that's why I couldn't give it flawless, unfortunately.
I'm booking.
So you
I'm
were
booking a
close
flight
in.
to Australia
Jeez,
to
bud.
come fight you.
Yeah, that's You won't be the only
2 out
one.
of 3,
These two want to fight me sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was definitely an amazing album. We
It
want
is.
to thank you very much for nominating it.
Yeah, thank you guys for giving me a platform to come talk about it.
All good.
Cool.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. We have social media, all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are Flawless AMP on all of those, so check us out. Give us a rating. Every little bit helps us find music lovers just like you. And, of course, as we said at the start, we have Patreon, so patreon.com/flawlessamp. Check us out there. If you can back us, that would be amazing. Other than that, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Quit my thinking, gonna try to blend in like I was never really there.